Welcome to day 3 of TC, day 4 for some of you. This is going to be a session focused on GCP and Tableau, but I want to ask you a quick question. I know this guy. Looking for familiar faces in the audience. Has anyone here ever wished that they could burst their server cluster, make it bigger in a hurry? You got Black Friday coming up if you're in retail. Maybe you've got open enrollment if you're in healthcare or insurance. Maybe you just know that you have an end-of-year crunch, or I work with a ski resort and they do all of their data processing in April to figure out what they should do better next year. Anyone? A few people, come on. Yes, I would like to be able to make my server cluster twice as big in a hurry. What if you could do that while your server cluster was running? Like, you don't have to do a maintenance window. You could literally do it live. Would that be interesting? Okay, a couple of people. And just a quick show of hands, since you're at Tableau conference, you all use Tableau. I'm just going to assume that. Has anyone had the situation where you were trying to do real-time analytics, where it's not, monthly isn't good enough, weekly isn't good enough, daily isn't good enough, especially in retail. We have a number of our customers that are we want to see what the trend is versus last year, this day. And we're going to look at that on a department-by-department basis across all of our stores, essentially in real time. Anyone? Okay, okay, you're in the right place. The reason I say that is come back to this. I've been on a journey with customers around GCP for probably the last year or so, and I'll go into the reasons why, but this is the only platform that I'm aware of that makes it super easy to ingest, particularly into Google BigQuery, at I think it's 100,000 records a minute, at the same time that it's turning those into a columnar store and responding to customer queries. So I'm a big fan of every columnar store. So if you're using Tableau extracts, they're a columnar store, they're great. If you are using Snowflake, columnar store, awesome. If you are using Azure DW, columnar store in memory, awesome. But in a lot of cases, when customers are first getting into columnar stores, they might just click that extract button. And we are limited to being able to do those extracts on 15-minute increments. And while we're doing it, we're putting a tremendous load on your Tableau server. So you can kind of either have it be high performant, or you can have it be really up to date. And it's always been kind of that choice. So if you are in retail, if you have that thing, I want to say GCP might be the exact right platform for you. So I hope now that I've got your attention, there you go. Back to this one for a second. So who am I? So my name is Arlo Paraños. I have had the good fortune to be working with actually Google as one of my accounts. We're working with them on how they're using Tableau. If you ever thought about a company that's data-driven, like, wow, just change the world. And so they have some really interesting demands. Everyone in their organization is used to being able to access all the data all the time, live, and make better decisions for themselves, for their communities, for their products, for their customers. And so in working with them, the scale of data, the scale of tables, the scale of analytics, the scale of employees, the scale of problems, the scale of everything has just been really fun to work with. And so I was kind of looking at what is it about GCP that lines up with Tableau? So I need to know, don't be bashful, I need to know who in this room is already in the cloud with Tableau. Not as many as I would have expected. Okay, so the rest of you are either not using Tableau and you just came here because it's fun, or you're on-prem, or, okay, all right. So the reason I wanted to know that is the biggest change in going to GCP is not going to GCP. The biggest change is if you're used to hardware and servers, and you are moving to any of the cloud providers, whether it's Azure or AWS or Google, the things you can do, the speed with which you can move in the cloud is ridiculous. I'll give you a few examples where we're going through this. The flip side is, if you're used to doing things on-prem, whether it's on VMware or physical boxes, and you are not used to some of the networking concepts in the cloud, they can really throw you for a loop until you get used to them, at which point they'll just become second nature. So I'll walk you through a few of those considerations as well. So I wanted to start with kind of the why, and I kind of gave you that. What are some of the customer use cases for why people would be using GCP? I also then wanted to go into how would you do it? Like, what is the step? And the steps, I mean, are how would you start? How would you start the Tableau piece? And how would you expand? And I'll be honest with you, I have one demo that I really wanted to do for you guys. I was up till 5 in the morning working on it. I can't make it work. I'm so sorry. I hope that I will describe to you the beautiful vision, and then we will figure out how we do it next year or something like that. And then the result. So that's out there. So why are they doing it? We kind of talked about its ingestion, but there's also another big reason. So let's say that you woke up one morning and you went to your Google search engine and it just didn't respond. Zombie apocalypse. There's no other explanation. If you typed in a Google query looking for something and it took 7 seconds, world is coming to an end, locusts, horsemen, it's over. What I'm saying is, if there was one company that has made their name synonymous with speed, access, and reliability, it's probably these guys. So when you're thinking of who would I trust to actually handle my data with speed, openness, and reliability, you look at the data centers that they're building. I'm actually working with one group inside of Google. All they do is build new data centers. And let me just tell you, they're busy because they're putting up data centers all over the world. Has anyone here tried Tableau Online? Tableau Online's awesome. I use it all the time. It's a SaaS offering from Tableau. It's a lot of the benefits. This gentleman and I were just working with a couple of days ago. It's fantastic. And then when I go to some of my customers that are in Australia or Singapore and are trying to figure out how to handle GDPR for their European customers, or how to maybe keep stuff out of the NSA sniffers as they're going through Virginia, we don't have a pod in Asia Pacific for Tableau Online, but Google does, and they've got a ton of them. So if you're willing to actually install the software, you can put it anywhere you want on Earth. So that is it's just mind-boggling to me. By the way, I like to put something in for Vegas every time. They are opening up, I think their next public data center that'll be available for GCP is opening up here, and I was checking to see if it was available in time for conference. It's not. I think it's slated to be available in either November or December. So if you wanted to keep it close to home or you want to come visit, because you like the food, it's up to you. This one happens to be in the Dells, Oregon, which I guess is a great place if cooling and hydropower are big on your agenda. And you guys might know they're committed to making all these data centers, I think, carbon neutral, I think by 2022. So it's a good thing. If you have kids, it makes a difference. So if you're here at Tableau Conference, I'd like to think you've been in the Tableau family for a while. And there are some companies that like to tell you how to do it. There are some companies that like to tell you crazy ways to do it. I'm not going to go into who they are. Tableau generally likes to find out how you want to do it. And so we have not been telling people you need to go to the cloud, or you need to go on-prem, or you need to pay us one way, or you need to. We've been trying to say, how do you want to do this? And so what a lot of our customers told us about 5 years ago is they wanted to do it in AWS. Just because that's where the train that was leaving the station, no one ever got fired for choosing AWS. That's kind of the way it went. So we have a ton of resources out there for AWS. And it is true, I think AWS now, I saw their last earnings, and I want to say it was like $16 billion a quarter in revenue coming out of AWS. It now makes apparently more money than the store. Well done, Jeff. Well done. But that being said, there are a lot of people who might not want to have all their eggs in one basket. You guys actually saw AWS didn't want to have all their eggs in one basket with UPS. And I think they don't want to have any of their eggs in their basket with FedEx or something weird like that. But I was looking to see who are the people who are like, maybe not AWS. And I'll just tell you, I'm not going to give you the names. It's not that kind of session. But a lot of big retailers, if your biggest competitor is Amazon, maybe you don't want to send them a check every month for like $20,000 or $200,000. It's just a thing. So when I was looking at who were early adopters of not AWS, it was a lot of those. But it's not just retail. It has also been healthcare. It has also been manufacturing. It has also been social media. And I think if you are not a retailer and you're trying to figure out, yes, reliability is great. one of the things, I've worked with AWS, I've worked with Azure, and I'll show you this in a couple of seconds. If you are building stuff in in GCP, you can do it through the GUI, or you can do the exact same thing at the command line, but they do something that I hadn't seen before, which is after you build something in the GUI, you can just say, export that as a REST output that I can then input into my scripts, so that essentially if I'm doing this twice or I'm doing this 3 times, I can just automate it. If I want to go on vacation and like kick this off on a schedule, automate it. So we have one of our customers, they have one of the biggest Tableau farms in the industry. I think it's well over, I want to say it's close to 1,000 cores with over 100 nodes. And they rebuild the entire thing from scratch via script every 30 days. Their concern is advanced persistent threats. So if somebody was able to get elevated privileges, they just want to wipe it out. They know that every 30 days, their entire Tableau cluster is completely clean because the hackers can't change their script. I was like, wow, that is awesome. So again, if you're doing that in other systems, you might be able to do both, but if you essentially can do it once in GCP and a GUI, you can then have it be automated the next time you do it, which I think is amazing. And that's part of why this, I think, was the second quarter that Google called out their earnings. And they are now at $8 billion business just with GCP. So if you were an $8 billion business and you weren't Google, you would be proud. You'd be like, we did $8 billion in revenue. And they're like, we did $8 billion in revenue in this tiny portion of our business, but it's growing fast. So keep that in mind. Come on in the water is fine. There are some very large customers that have gone before you or with you. And I expect to see that momentum kind of taking off over the next 3 years as people are playing kind of the spread your bets game. So this was the quote from Gartner, is that GCP is increasingly chosen as a strategic alternative by AWS, by customers, especially those who potentially compete with Amazon. And I say, if you're competing with Amazon, that's obvious. The other one is if you just have a culture that is about automation, if you have a culture that is about scripting, if you have a culture of coders, GCP is probably a very good home for you. All right, so this is good. I almost pulled this slide out. This is, if you've been with Tableau for 3 years, 5 years, I think this guy's been with Tableau for 12 or 13 years. So there wasn't even a server. But if you've been there for 5 or 6 years, there has been a server, and most of our customers, I want to say like 80 to 85% of them 5 years ago were running on-prem, either on VMs on hardware or actually on physical hardware. And the basic architecture looked like this, which is you've got a corporate network, you've got some users, that's maybe AD, maybe it's LDAP, you've got some desktops, that's where you're doing your publishing, you've got a server, and you've got some data. Could be Oracle, SQL, what have you, right? And then you've got a firewall. But everyone is inside that network. And at this point, Tableau Server, and if you go back 5 years, Tableau Desktop are Windows-only products. So essentially, all of our communication is happening over NetBIOS. That's how Windows talks to Windows. So this gentleman was at Apple, and he was like, I want to run Tableau. And they said, do they have an Apple client? He said, no. They said, what do they say?
Who's that?
You.
Yeah,
what?
I need a Windows machine.
So he was, I think it was like patient 0 at Apple. They are now doing very well. And you're at Google now, right? Yeah. Okay, there you go. He's like the future of my career. So take it a little bit different. So for any of you that are contemplating the move to cloud, you are not going to be contemplating it just for Tableau. Most of the time, somebody at the CIO level has said, we want to terminate the lease on this building. We don't want to keep upgrading all of our hardware every 3 years. We're not going to buy the next wave of that. So we've got 18 months, we've got 12 months, 14 months to essentially vacate our IT infrastructure and shut it down. I've got one who's losing the lease on their building in 7 weeks. It's very motivating because it's in Denver and it's very cold and it's just a bad thing. So what they're facing is getting a single server up on any of the cloud platforms is so easy. It is easier than installing it on-prem. Getting multiple servers up is a little trickier because you're generally going to be dealing with some advanced networking. And if you want to get them up on your network, but pointing back to your Active Directory because you're a Windows shop on-prem, that is actually a lot trickier. So if you wanted to get Tableau Server up and running on GCP or Azure or AWS, all of you could do it by the end of this afternoon. If you want to get it secure, talking to other servers and talking back to your Active Directory, you're going to need to involve your security team, because you're going to need firewall ports. You're going to need to involve your networking team, because you're going to need to put in place essentially an IPsec VPN. Azure has something they call Direct Connect. I think the one from Google is actually called Direct Connect as well. It's basically an IPsec bridge, just like you might have had to a colo a few years ago. So it's not something you can do on your own. So this will be an initiative if you're going to put this in production. How many of you are already in GCP? Anyone? I'm not going to ask you the company name. I'm not going to do that. But a few of you. If someone's willing to share, what was your process from getting from purely on-prem to purely in GCP, or has that even happened yet? Was it 12 months, 18 months?
Well, I just switched companies. My old company is completely on GCP.
Okay.
And my current is one department's transition.
Okay. So I just wanted to say that the trickiest parts of it are not Tableau. The trickiest parts of it are not Windows or Linux. The trickiest parts of it are actually getting authentication to work through your firewalls. And that is, if you are that person, you are probably in the wrong room. You're probably at the wrong conference. But I love you, so thank you for being here. But realistically, I am barely that person. I take these people out to beer, but I just wanted you to be aware that essentially the biggest difference is if you want to go back to Active Directory, you've got to get a bunch of ports through your firewall, or you need to do something called ADFS, Active Directory Federation Services, or you essentially need to move your Active Directory into something cloud accessible, like Azure AD, or I was just blown away. Google in GCP offers native Active Directory, which I was just not expecting. It works really well. It's awesome. All right, so for the technical part of this, I am not going to be telling you about all the things that you did not come to Tableau Conference to know about. I want you to know that you need to sort them out, but I'm not going to be talking to you about networks and routing rules and so forth. I am going to be talking to you about installing Tableau Server, connecting Tableau Server, and using Tableau Server in the cloud. All right, so let's actually skip out of PowerPoint for a little bit. Let's have a little fun. Let's go with this one. So this is Tableau on GCP in action. And the boring part, if you're not used to the cloud, is that it looks just like Tableau anywhere else. Superstore, still there. So you're like, what's the big deal? So this is kind of fun. I mentioned, wouldn't it be nice if you could increase the size of your farm on the fly? So this one is an environment that I'm managing. For Tableau. And some of my colleagues around the world have been using this to mock up environments for customers. I wanted to show an actual customer environment. I was told I could not do that on stage. We had to go through a bunch of legal red tape. So instead, you get my demo. I would much rather do your demo. But I was told by the sponsors that was not going to happen. So I built up a 3-server cluster. And it was actually very easy, but I thought, man, once you get on a roll, you just want to make it bigger. And so I'll show you very quickly what it took to build the first one of these. It's super simple. So you basically say create instance. And if I was to call this one node 4, I can basically pick from any of these data centers around the world. And just for ease of use, I figured we're in Las Vegas. I'll go with Los Angeles. I wanted to do the one down the block, but just not open yet. But again, we've got locations in Asia Pacific. We've got locations in Europe. And we've got locations around North America and South America. Not South America. All right. So let's go with LA. And then this is something that happens for a lot of people if they're not used to the cloud. So on hardware, we tell you that we need 8 physical cores to run and 64 gigs to run. And we've been saying that for about 2 years. And I just want to be honest with you. We keep adding stuff. People keep telling us they want AI, they want machine learning, they want graph databases, they want natural language processing. So we keep adding them. So Ask Data is based on the Elastic search engine with some great indexing. Explain the Mark is based on some really aggressive advanced statistical modeling that happens in the background. If you're using Data Catalog, that's based on a GraphQL database. So all of those things are happening. I just want to be honest with you. We keep saying 8 cores and 64 gigs of RAM, but there's more going in there. There's more happening. So that is meant to be the bare minimum. So realistically, if you are moving out to the cloud, we'd love to see you on a few of those or a really big one. We don't care. But if you're at 8 cores, you're going to be looking bad. So another thing to know, on physical processors, 8 cores means 8 cores, 8 hyper-threaded Intel cores or AMD cores typically. In the cloud, or even on VMware, everyone is using a hypervisor. So the hypervisor separates out and identifies each side of a hyperthread as a vCPU. So you're like, ooh, now I got 16. Wrong. You have 8 that can basically execute at once, and 8 that can go whenever those other 8 are idle. We're not idle. We're just not. So if you're in production, the minimum requirement in AWS or in GCP or Azure is 16 vCPU, which is 8 physical cores. So I see a lot of people get hung up on that. Don't do that. So by default, I would go out and I would pick one of these standard images, something like an N1 standard 16. It's got 16 vCPUs, 8 physical cores. It's got 60 gig of RAM. What do you think? Do I care? I don't know. For me, it's close enough. Some of our people say that if you're extract heavy, or if you're working with really big data, social media analytics, streaming data, a lot of stuff from the web, you might actually want more than 8 gigs per physical core. So some of our SCs are saying, hey, we're seeing ROI on just going with 12 per physical core, which would be like a 96 gig system, or even 16 per physical core, it should be a 128 gig system. So something that you can't do in a couple of the other clouds, or at least I wasn't able to when I tried in Azure or in AWS, is you can say, you know what, I don't want the off-the-shelf. I actually just want to go with something custom. So I'm going to go with, give me 16 vCPUs and give me 64 gigs of RAM, because that's what the recommended requirements are. But if I find out that I need more RAM after monitoring it for a while, I can simply shut down the machine and say, no, I should have gone with 80. Not there yet, 96, and we're good. So you will not see that kind of flexibility in almost no other cloud platform that I've seen yet. Any questions, comments? Okay. So the next piece we're looking for is storage. So if you go out, everything I'm doing is on our docs. I'll show you that as we get past it, but I didn't want to just have you read the funny manual right off the bat. That just seemed rude. So instead, we're going to pick a storage system. This is basically a boot volume. And so we support Linux. We also support Windows now. It is totally up to you. I'm going to go with Windows. That's my background and history. But if you're doing this at scale, there's a good chance you'll get a cost savings from doing it on Linux. Not a performance gain, just a cost savings. So let's go with Windows 2016, Data Center. Here we go. And critical piece, especially if you are doing extracts, is do not go with spinning disk for a Tableau server. Just don't. Just go with SSDs. They used to be expensive. Now they're cheap. Now they're worth it. Anyone we see that's on spinning disk and is using any sort of extracts ingest by writing to disk. Then they break it up into all the columns writing to disk, and then they write the final thing to disk. So if you're doing a 50 gig extract, it's 150 gigs of writes in each time that thing updates. Just don't do it. Similarly, our backup and recovery, incredibly read-write intensive. So I'm going to go with SSD. If you want to do split disks, a lot of people like those. We actually recommend those in the docs. For ease of use right now, I'm just going to stick with a large 128 gig volume. I mean, again, that's extensible if I ever need to change it. So one other piece that's relevant in here, by default, Google being security-minded, these are essentially not accessible. And for a Tableau server, absolutely going to want 80 because that's the default connection. You're going to want 443 because that's your SSL connection. And we're also going to need that 88 or 8850 if you are on TSM, which I hope you are by now. And one last piece in here. By default, these would just pop up on a virtual network. So your virtual network is completely distinct from anyone else's virtual network on Google. It's not like you're in like some like hotel Wi-Fi, hotel Wi-Fi, or like at the airport at Las Vegas where everyone can like sniff your traffic in promiscuous mode. Essentially what they're doing is they're creating a VLAN that is available only to people within your organization. So all of the traffic is essentially encrypted from everything else that's going over their wires. If you think about networking, yeah, they kind of got that. So I'm going to put this into not just my private network, but I'm going to isolate it from all the other stuff. So if you've got people that are in GCP doing SQL Server, people that are in GCP doing a bunch of web servers and websites or web applications, you can actually isolate all of your Tableau stuff just to keep it relatively simple for you, keep them out of your way, keep you out of theirs. So I'm going to go ahead and just click on the networking tab, and I'm going to say I want to swap this into a virtual private cloud, which is within my company's virtual private cloud. And I'm going to get a ephemeral internal IP address. That means whenever it comes up, it's like DHCP, debatable. But if I want anyone from the outside world to get this, I'm going to need to go with a static IP address. So you don't have to do this for it to work. It's not a Tableau requirement, but it's the simplest configuration for external-facing stuff to have a load balancer and then reroute that to at least a fixed IP address on the Tableau servers. So there is a charge for that, but by the time you're in production, there's going to be a charge for all of this. So I'm not going to do this one because I'm never actually going to boot this. We are going to go with ephemeral and ephemeral, and we're done. So if you are, I literally am working with a customer. They are trying to get their Tableau server cluster up and running at twice the scale it is now by Black Friday. You guys can do the math. That's next Friday. Sorry, it's the Friday after next. They got 2 weeks. And their IT department said that they can definitely, positively get them the hardware 6 weeks from now. And so they were like, should we go to the cloud? I was like, maybe. And the reason I say that is we just created a new node. It is up and running, and we can RDP into it immediately. But I said in Google, you're not going to do things once. The whole idea is you're going to do them multiple times. So as I was building out my farm, I was like, wow, this is kind of cool. What if I could, instead of going through all that the third time or the fifth time or whatever else, what if I could just say, hey, I've got this node that I like. It's kind of got all those things set up for it. What if I could just create a similar node? So I've basically just taken that and stamped a new one. That is way faster than the IT department at that column. So this is now node 5. And we're good. Yep. So that if you wanted to increase capacity, that took, I'm going to go with less than a minute. And so there are a couple of steps to actually join that into the cluster, but let's go back to our cluster. By the way, questions, statements, thoughts? Is this what you were expecting? I don't know. Are there any questions that what's the burning question you wanted to know about GCP? Just kind of watching everyone, they're like, yeah, I knew that. Yeah? Okay, all right. Well, so I will tell you, this is the one that bummed me out. So in my dream land, the demo I wanted to do for you, and I just was not able to pull this off, is I wanted to actually do the thing where we're ingesting 100,000 rows of data a minute into Google Cloud or Google BigQuery. And then I wanted to actually take our 4th server and increase it from 8 cores, so 16 vCPU, to 32 vCPU while the rest of the cluster is working. Because you can increase capacity on a server that goes down, and everything else will just take care of it. And I was like, and I want to use our new server management tool to watch the load and tab jolt to actually do the injection and like 250 users a minute and have you guys all watch it. And I was going to give you guys the IP address and have you get it from your phone. I got to tell you, it's been a long week. That is not happening. So that's just a lot. And I was actually really hoping that the demo we were going to get was one of the largest retailers in the world. It was supposed to be my co-presenter, and we were just going to show what they're doing, which was what I was really hoping for. And just for legal reasons, that was blocked. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. So let's see. What else did I want you guys to know about GCP? So I told you that we weren't going to go into all of the networking pieces. I'm going to say that if you are building more than one server, you will end up with a VCP, which is this virtual private network. But I don't know that we want to go into that level of detail in this room. Question back there.
Yeah, so if you want to increase your computing power, do you recommend scaling up, so from 60 to 32 virtual cores, or just raising the number?
So that's a great question. Just because I've got a mic and he doesn't. The question was, if you wanted to scale, should you scale up or should you scale out? And I thought this was literally like a 6-to-1, half a dozen to the other until recently. And a few of our internal team started going across our organization. So they started going across dev, support, product management. We have something called the Major Account Care team, which deals with our biggest customers in the world. And they were like, so what is the answer? And we've actually got a real answer. I don't know that it's in print anywhere, but you can take this to the bank. You get more benefit from scaling out 8 physical core systems or 16 vCPU systems until you get to 5. And the reason for that is that you get some resiliency, you get some HA, and you get some specialization. So the VizQL work is tons of tiny calculations, but it's very easy to time slice because they're very discrete. And the background of work, if you're doing extracts, essentially it runs until it's done, and then it goes to the next task. And so it just steady eddy until they're done. And so when you put those two things on the same system, they just conflict like crazy. So that if you're overloaded on backgrounders, VizQLs are trying to get access to cores. So if you can get a dedicated backgrounder or 2 and dedicated VizQLs or 3, you've got HA, you've got all this great stuff. If you kept doing that, there's a point where the inter-process communication, particularly the repository and reads and writes to file store, which are replicated by default, start to outweigh the benefits. So scale out to 5, 8 physical cores, then scale up to 16 physical cores each. So you would be at that's a 90 physical core system. At that point, start scaling out again. And if you get past 90, if you get past 90, talk closely with your Tableau team. We have customers that are in production at over 1,000, and those farms tend to look a lot more specialized with a lot more pieces and parts that are kind of unique. But we can, if you wanted to, you could do a single 64-core monolith, and it's just a lot easier to manage, but it's also a giant single point of failure. So we don't recommend it. Did that answer your question? Okay. Let's see. What else could I give you guys that's super valuable? Any other questions that are either GCP specific or moving to the cloud specific? Yep.
When's BI engine for Tableau coming?
So good. I want to ask you who you're with, but I don't want to get my hand slapped. The question was, when is BI engine going to be supported on Tableau? The answer off the record, I'm not in product management, I'm not a lawyer, disclaimer, is probably January-ish, definitely Q1-ish. Our product team is working with their product team, and it looks like it will be fully transparent. We will still issue the same query, but BI Engine effectively is a way to speed up BigQuery. BigQuery is an amazing columnar store, but there can be a little bit of lag in terms of just getting it into memory, and BI Engine essentially pre-caches in memory some of the results. So you end up getting not just columnar, but columnar in memory, which is it's just great. Great question. And I get that a lot, actually at Google, so that's funny. All right, let's see. So other cool things that I can show you. Let's see. So we did clusters, we did copies, We did the install. We're not doing VPC. I'm not sure that without that demo, I've got all that much left to show you guys. So, yes.
So at our company, we have 36 bounded contacts. So I'm an analyst who has to work across
I don't know what that means. 36 bounded.
different development stacks. So each team operates individually.
Oh,
So
okay,
some are GCP,
okay.
Some are on AWS, some are on Hive. Anyway, but in my role, I have to work across those. So I would use Tableau to bring in these data sources across these stacks. But so this isn't really about where we store our Tableau server, but can I write back to BigQuery from Tableau?
Interesting question. So just again, I think everyone probably caught that, but in case you didn't, she was saying that she works with groups that are able to choose their own platforms on a project-by-project basis as opposed to a corporate standard. So she needs to kind of speak all the main cloud platforms and development platforms. And so she might have some RDS data, she might have some BigQuery data, she might have some AWS, she might have some GCP. And the question ended at, can I write back to the data source with Tableau? And the basic answer, the most broad answer is Tableau is read-only, period. I think we got access to a lot more data than we might have if we'd been read-write, because we could have crapped all over a bunch of application processes. So we, for the most, it's easier if you think that we are exclusively read-only. It's not 100% true, but that's a better way to think of it. The edge cases like the write-back extension and creating temp tables for LOD calcs are just not worth talking about. I think we just, actually in 2019.3, rolled out this super weird thing where if you're joining like a giant fact table to like a small lookup Excel table, if we have the rights, we'll actually make a temp copy of the Excel table and do that join in the database. But the only things we're doing are creating temp tables, ever. We're never, the new exception to that was announced yesterday is the ability for prep, not Tableau Desktop, but prep, to do ingestion and outgestion to, I think it's going to be SQL, Snowflake, Oracle. I don't think BigQuery is in that list in the first go-round.
And that's released now or coming next year?
That was demoed in the keynote yesterday, or actually Tuesday morning, and I think they committed to a first H 2020 for that. Yeah. Let me see. Let me double check and see if I had anything else that I super duper wanted you to see. No, not so much. I think I had some slides that basically show you stuff, but I thought it'd be more interesting to show you live. But like I said, that giant demo that I really was hoping for, it just couldn't pull it off. So we might actually be done. If you have other questions, I'm happy to take them on a one-on-one basis with a mic off. That way I can actually ask you who you work for and what you're doing, and then I won't feel bad about it. This will be the last one before we do that. Yes?
What you showed is actually you create this free server on the OS level, not install the Tableau server or Worker. So my question is, if you install the, like say, one-premise server, can you duplicate that as it works? Or the Worker you created on the server level, can you duplicate the Worker as the
No. That's an excellent question. So the question the gentleman was asking is, there are two separate stages in the process, and the one of installing Tableau Server, like on GCP or anything, it's just not fast. It's like a 32-stage process now with the GraphQL and the Elastic and the SQL and the Zookeeper and the Apache and there is just nothing fast about that install. And the process of a worker node joining a Tableau cluster at this point is not something that should be done. They should be done on a one-on-one basis. So it's not just like I've got a clone of a worker and I'm going to bring it up. The inter-server communication, the cluster really acts like it's a single server or service that's spread across a number of nodes. And so if they are not yet anonymizable. There's some work. I was wondering if we were going to talk about it in the keynote. It was probably alluded to in a couple of sessions here where we're going to be using some services that are a lot less stateful, but that has not been, I guess it hasn't been publicly announced yet. We're doing it internally. Just say the word Kubernetes. But I can't say any more about that. Excellent question. I'd love to, yes?
Yeah, just follow up that is, so when you install Tableau, do you install on the programming engine or are you installing on the OS or like Microsoft?
Yeah, so in this case, essentially you are choosing a VM, so CPU, RAM, compute, and then you are installing an OS, either Windows or Linux are the two that we support currently, and then you are installing our code. So our code is almost identical. We use the same open source services and the same proprietary stuff, whether it's Windows or Linux, hence the very similar performance. But that has to get layered onto an operating system for now. That will not always be the case. You know, we are a big SaaS platform at this point, so we have to pay a cloud provider for all that stuff. So we want to be as efficient and scalable as possible, shut stuff down when we're not using it, just like you guys might. And B, we're anticipating that working with Salesforce will actually increase that. They are practically the patient zero of SaaS, and so they've been at it effectively longer than basically anybody, and at a scale that's just amazing. We expect we'll get access to a lot of good pipeline and development through that partnership over the next while, but nothing specific at this point. Excellent question. Thank you all. If you are interested, I mentioned to you I work with Google directly every 2 or 3 days. And I am very interested in leveraging the fact that I work for Tableau and with Google to help other people make this journey as seamless as possible. I heard a few of you say you're heading that direction. I know a few of you are already there. If you would like my card or would like to keep in touch, I'd love to potentially have a global virtual user group for people that are doing Tableau on GCP so that as new features like BI Engine come out, as opposed to you having to test them, you can just be like, hey everybody, how's it going? And they go like, it's awesome. And they're like, how can I tell if it's awesome? And they'd be like, do this thing. And you go, that's awesome. So if you'd like to leave me your card, if you'd like to get in touch, I would love to kind of keep this going. If you'd like to retain or remain anonymous, just tell me and I'll keep you on the BCC side of that thread. But it would be great to have this as a kind of a virtual user group next year with a lot more to it. Nope. All right. Thank you.